Welcome to the Stokastic MLB Strategy Show. I'm your host, Neil Orfield. You can find me on Twitter at PlayerQDFS. I'm here with Adam Scherer. You can find him on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. And this show is sponsored by Sorare MLB, which is a collection of digital trading cards and an NFT-based free-to-play baseball game. We'll talk about that a little bit more later on. One thing we won't be doing, though, is looking at my account today because I switched phones recently. And everything is transferred over to my new phone except for apparently the Authenticator app. And I cannot find my old phone, which I need to access my Sorare account. So we won't actually look at my Sorare account today, but we'll talk about it a little bit. Adam, how's your day going?
Pretty good. And yeah, the Authenticator thing on a new phone is a pain in the ass. But yeah, no, today's good. Yesterday was frustrating. Had a good early slate. Frustrating, but good early slate. Finished like 15th in the big tournament. So like 3x'd in that tournament and then just gave it all back on the main, the night slate and the NBA slate. So it was like, oh, cool. Like we're starting off with, a nice profit in the morning. Like today should be a good day. And it was like, no, we're just going to get like a 10% return on everything else we play so that we lose money.
Yeah, that's super frustrating. I've been there many times before where I do well on an early slate and like, all right, today's off to a good start. I'm going to be making money today. And then it all goes away. Yep. Kyle B says, totally geeked. I unlocked a Bichette card on Sorare. So glad to hear you're doing well, Kyle B. I can't even see. I don't think I won any cards in MLB. So I don't think I have any cards to unlock anyway, sadly. But yeah, that's a nice card to unlock there. By the way, guys, while you're coming in, please do like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that notification button so you can get alerts when our shows go live. We have 13 games to talk about. I think this is the largest slate we've done, at least for like a single slate. Do you agree with that, Adam?
Probably. I mean, there could only be two more.
True. Yeah. I don't think we've had any full 15 game slates yet this year.
Like so many teams are still playing those like 6:30 starts that I don't think we have either.
Yeah. So yeah, kind of nuts. We're going through 13 games here. We will get through it though. No problem. Adam, do you have any overarching thoughts on the slate or are you ready to jump into it?
No, this is my first look at it.
Perfect. I don't see that we have any pitcher for the Nationals in Fantasy Cruncher. Let me see if do you know of who's pitching tonight for the Nationals?
I'm seeing Mackenzie Gore listed. I don't know if that's confirmed.
Okay, so possibly the Nationals will be pitching Mackenzie Gore tonight. Unclear there. Oh no, sorry, I meant the Mets. We do have Mackenzie Gore for the Nationals. I don't see a Mets pitcher. I was looking at that.
I've seen Tyler McGill listed.
Okay, so we've got probably Tyler McGill pitching for the Mets tonight. Mackenzie Gore for the Nationals. Any interest in either of those pitchers, Adam?
They're both somewhat interesting, but with it being a 13-game slate, probably not all that appealing. These are two guys where like you'd be happy to have them on either of yesterday's slates, but here, you have a pretty good Mets offense, or at least that's what we're told, going up against Mackenzie Gore. He does have good strikeout stuff. The strikeout stuff has improved this year. He is a highly regarded prospect. He was part of the Juan Soto trade. There's certainly talent there, and again, that's why I think if this were a smaller slate, I'd be more interested. He does have a 30.4% strikeout percentage so far this year. The problem is he's also walked 12% of hitters, so he does play with fire, and this is a relatively tough lineup. He has allowed a little under 1 home run per 9, 3.66 FIP. Like, he's a good pitcher. He just has one glaring flaw, and he's not exactly cheap, so it makes it tough to get there. McGill on the other side does have a good matchup against the Nats. Pretty weak lineup, solid enough pitcher. So far this season for McGill, only a 17% strikeout percentage, 11.5 walk percentage, 5.4 FIP. He hasn't had it so far this year, but he did put up some pretty decent numbers last year. Still, though, the Nats have an implied run total north of 4 that, relative to what the Nats are normally at, it's actually 4.4. Relative to where you normally see the Nats, that's kind of a red flag for going to McGill. So with it being a 13-gamer, I don't think I have too much interest in either side. Right now, Gore's pulling 4% on DraftKings. McGill's pulling 1%. Just doesn't seem like a spot you really need to get to.
Okay. And what about the bet on the other side?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because, I don't think either pitcher is bad, but both teams, 4.6 implied run total for the Mets, 4.4 for the Nats, 9 run total for the game. It looks like it's supposed to be 85 degrees with not much wind, but whatever wind there is blowing out. So seems like pretty favorable hitting conditions. Mackenzie Gore, like I said, does put too many guys on base, and that can drive up his pitch count, get him out of the game early. So Met stacks certainly have a high ceiling here. And, with the way baseball works, after letting everyone down as the clear top stack yesterday on the early slate, they probably will come through today at lower ownership. But so high upside spot for them, just because you can get extra base runners against Gore. You can drive up the pitch count, get him out of the game. And you do have a lot of good bats in the Mets lineup. Right now, they are coming in middle of the pack with a 4% top stack percentage, 3.5% projected ownership, relatively expensive as well, though. Nationals more difficult to get to given that they aren't very good. They are offering more value. A 15.5% chance of being the top stack on DraftKings is the most valuable stack. And like I said, McGill has had some issues this year. So I'm not likely to go out of my way to get to the Nats, but I think if you want to mix in some Luis Garcia, Keibert Ruiz for cheap, that's fine. CJ Abrams is essentially minimum salary at shortstop. Dominic Smith is minimum salary at first base. So at the very least, this is a team where I think you could use them as like 2-mans, 3-mans just to, offset a more expensive, better stack and then still get to good pitching.
Okay. And then how would you rank the 4 sides of the game?
Mets 1, Nats 2, Gore 3, McGill 4.
Okay. Big Kev 777 asks, will you post this to Apple Podcasts after the show ever again? I don't know. I'll look into whether that is something we can do. I don't know if that's something that I should be doing, trying to get it onto Apple Podcasts, but I'll look into whether we can get this posted to Apple Podcasts with me as the producer. I don't know if that's something that is my responsibility. So I'll look into that for you, Big Kev.
My favorite part of you producing is every time we get a question like this, I can just sit here like, I know it's not on me.
Right. I'm like, nobody ever told me that I'm supposed to be doing anything to get this onto a podcast. So
I mean, it's probably just Jordan's fault.
I'm going to blame Jordan, even though I am technically the producer. I was trained in to click a button to start the show, essentially. But
yeah, you can only do so much with bad coaching.
Exactly. Jordan's just a bad coach. All right. Second game of the slate, we have the Pittsburgh Pirates at your Baltimore Orioles. Johan Oviedo on the mound for the Pirates. Kyle Bradish for the Orioles. And any interest in these pitchers, Adam?
This is a kind of weird one. The Pirates in general are just weird, I guess. But like Oviedo is a pitcher who I wasn't particularly interested in early in the season, but he's actually been solid so far. And then, on the other side, the Pirates were a team coming into the year that it was pretty likely you could just like pick on with opposing pitchers, and that hasn't been the case. So both these pitchers are cheap, and that gives me some interest, I guess. Bradish is pulling 20% ownership, only a 6.5% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. That seems like a lot of ownership for him, but I get it in the sense that he is cheap. Oviedo is pulling 1% ownership, 5.5% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. So this is just an example where I don't love either of these pitchers. I think you can make a case for gambling on either of them if you need to save salary, but Kyle Bradish should not be 20 times the ownership of Oviedo at the same price point. Yes, the Orioles are favored by a decent amount, minus 154 favorites, 4.9 implied run total compared to the Pirates 4.1. Bradish should be higher owned, but there shouldn't be that level of gap. So if you're finding that you need cheap pitching in your lineups, I still think you should be turning some of that Bradish into Oviedo.
Okay. Interesting. Kyle Bradish is one of those guys that I remember from last year. We talk about rookie pitchers coming in who had great strikeout rate in AAA, but then wasn't that good in the majors. Do you think he's still kind of a wild card, or do we know what he is now?
I think he's still kind of a wild card. He is somebody that I am relatively bullish on his stuff. He's only struck out 19.5% of hitters this year, 5.14 FIP. He hasn't been great so far, but going back to last year, he was just somebody that I think he puts it together and ends up being good. And so I'm always at least somewhat interested to roster him when he's cheap. The ownership is really what's scaring me off here, though.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if he's chalky, that seems like the right spot. What about the bats in this game? What's your level of interest?
Definitely interested in both sides, but the Orioles in particular, 4.9 implied run total. Obviously, I like getting to the Orioles whenever I can. There's just so much power, so much speed in this lineup. In the projected lineup that I'm looking at right now, Kyle Stowers is projected to hit 9th at 2,100. He hasn't been very good in the major leagues in a very limited sample, but this is a guy that tore up AAA and is a decent hitting prospect. He's not good by Orioles prospect standards, but that's just because they have so many of them. He's still somebody where for a 9-hitter, that's a lot of power at a cheap price tag. And the rest of the lineup, Mullins, Rutschman, Santander, Mountcastle, Hayes, Henderson, Mateo, these guys just give you, I skipped over Frazier, but he's cheap. So you can still play him. There's just every hitter in this lineup, assuming the lineup is what we expect, is either fast, has power, both, or in the case of Frazier, is at least cheap with multi-position eligibility. So it becomes a really, really easy team to stack. Oviedo, again, maybe not as bad as I thought he was going to be, but hasn't been lights out either. Striking out 19% of hitters, 3.8 FIP is good, only allowing 0.7 home runs per 9 so far this year. But you're still talking about just not really getting strikeouts. The left-handed power in Camden Yards does still play up. Right-handed power obviously is just heavily reduced because of the new stadium design. But Mullins, Rutschman, Santander from the left side in particular are going to look good. Henderson's cheap. On the other side, like I said with Bradish, he is still a bit of a wild card at this point. And you are getting a nice park shift for this left-handed power in the Pirates lineup. Bradish, since the start of last year, 172 expected ISO to righties, only 124 to lefties. This year, it's evened out a bit more, 165 to lefties, 177 to righties. He does have a much higher strikeout percentage against lefties, which is interesting. But Brian Reynolds at 5,700 looks like a really interesting play here. He is expensive, so that makes him more difficult to get to. Brian Hayes, McCutchen, both from the right side, so they're fine, but it does suck that they have to hit the ball 400 feet just to hit a home run to left field. Santana's cheap. Sawinski at 3,800 looks pretty good. So I definitely prefer the Orioles side. There's just no shortage of guys I can name that I want to get to from the Orioles. The Pirates, it's a little bit more individualized. I like Brian Reynolds if you can find the salary. I like Jack Sawinski. Hayes and McCutchen are fine, but so both offenses I think look okay. The Orioles certainly one I prefer. Baltimore right now only pulling 3% ownership as well. 3% chance of being the top stack. They're not exactly cheap. Pittsburgh pulling less than 1% ownership, 2.5% chance of being the top stack. There's just not much ownership coming into this game for a game that's being played in 80+ degree weather in Baltimore with two fine but not great pitchers.
Still Camden Yards, right? They just changed the dimensions.
Yeah, still.
I was gonna say I missed the old Camden Yards where it was a home run hitters park, and then I was like, wait, is it still Camden? I thought it was just okay.
Yeah, it's still Camden Yards. They just moved the left field wall. I think it used to be I think it was 333 down the line, but it went pretty much in left field, but it pretty much went straight across towards center field. So it was just really easy to hit home runs to left. They moved it back to where I think it's 360 or 370 now, but they also made it go from 8 feet tall to 16 feet tall. So it's just ridiculous.
That's a big difference there.
Yeah. But yeah, still Camden Yards. They didn't do anything to right field or center field. So there are still home runs to be had. The other thing with Camden Yards that I feel like people always slept on, you would get early in the season, people stacking the Camden Yards games because, it's Camden Yards and it's so hitter friendly. And they would be ignoring that it's 50 degrees in Baltimore in April and it's not hitter friendly. And then you get into this and people would be Camden Yards, that it's not actually a home run park, whatever. And then you get into the summer and it's 95 degrees and you can't breathe because it's so humid outside. And all you have to do is hit a pop-up and it's going to travel an extra, 30 feet. So it's always seemed very weather dependent to me as well.
Interesting. And how would you rank the four sides of this game?
Baltimore 1, Bradish 2, Pirates 3, Oviedo 4.
All right, we got a couple questions about stacking strategy that I do want to hit on. I'm trying to find what the first. Oh yeah, so Lefty Shank says, for these larger slates, do you set a rule if MME to only have 4 or 5 man stacks? And then Paul followed up, we need to talk stack strategy one of these days, how you choose the 5, not just 1 to 5 in the order. If you missed that one piece of a stack, sometimes might as well have had a different team altogether, like that Salt and Pepper song. He later admitted that he just wanted to reference this Salt and Pepper song. I don't even know what song you're talking about, Paul, but let's talk a little bit about stacks, Adam. So on these larger slates, are you going to have a 4 or 5 man stack in every one of your lineups?
Yeah, typically 5 man. I will DraftKings, obviously FanDuel. If you can run 5 mans there, then congratulations. But DraftKings tip mostly 5 mans. I do mix in some 4-4, 4-3 stacks. FanDuel, on larger slates, it's just gonna be all 4-4, 4-3 for me. Because I don't want to do on FanDuel. I don't really want to do 4 with no second stack because the scoring there is just more conducive to it correlates heavier with runs and RBIs, whereas on DraftKings it's home runs. So I'm more inclined on DraftKings to play a 5 man stack and then just 3 separate hitters, hoping they all hit home runs. Whereas FanDuel, I think it's more important to have a second stack in there. But yeah, I'm not going anything smaller than that on a big slate.
And then as far as gap rules go, so on my primary stack, I don't set any kind of stack rule. We've talked about this, no kind of gap rule. If you have gaps, of 2 or 3 between some of your bats, particularly if you have a 5 man stack, I don't worry about gap size at all. But I mean, I think the answer to what you're saying, Paul, is it happens more often than not. You're going to miss one of the bats. It's hard to get you have to get the stack right, and you do have to get the bats right. You're absolutely right about that, but it can be hard. It's a frustrating game. That just happens frequently. You get the right stack and you're going to get one of the bats wrong.
I don't think there's a ton of strategy to choosing guys from the individual stack. Outside of like, obviously you want the best hitters on the team if you can do it. But like, yes, there's less correlation. So like you and I talked about it before. If you were going to set some sort of gap rule, I think doing it in like a 2-man or a 3-man makes more sense. I still don't even do that, but you do lose some correlation. Like if you have I think the example he used was a 3-hitter and an 8-hitter. There's not much correlation between those guys in terms of like the 3-hitter still being on base for the 8-hitter to drive him in. There is still correlation though, in that if their team as a whole is just hitting well, you're still getting more at bats for everybody. Obviously, the 8-hitter is getting fewer at bats still than the 3-hitter, but he's still getting more at bats than he was projected for if the offense is doing really well. And then also, if you're just facing a pitcher that doesn't have it that day, your whole team is still facing it, regardless of what spot they are in the lineup. If you get out to a big lead and the other team just starts using their worst bullpen arm, that's still benefiting your whole lineup. So, like, there are still positive correlations. You just don't get the RBI, run scoring one that you typically think of between those two. But that's not a strong enough thing for me to like set a rule to change it. Especially because like it also ends up being balanced out some by, if like the 8-hitter in almost every case is just going to be lower owned than the 5-hitter. And so if I'm saying, well, I can't play the 3 and the 8-hitter together, I'm losing the ability to go to that team potentially and play a contrarian 2-man instead of the same 2-man, one of the same 2-mans everybody's playing. So that's, another factor where it's like, yeah, this isn't ideal, but because it's not ideal, it's also going to be lower owned, and that's going to offset that as well. So, yeah, I mean, outside of, and as far as, if you miss one guy in the stack, you miss out. Yeah, that's just sort of how it is. There's no, just where somebody's sitting on a batting order obviously isn't going to guarantee they do better than the guy hitting below them. Just because they are a better hitter doesn't mean they're going to do better than the guy hitting behind them in a given game. So, I mean, that just comes back to there's a lot of variance in baseball, and there's not a whole lot you can do about that.
Yeah, you kind of have to accept that. Like, it's just, I will say, if you use the top batters tool, you're going to do better off. You're going to be better off than you would otherwise be in figuring out who the best bet, like the highest likelihood of success. But yeah, it can be a frustrating game for sure. So just kind of have to accept that. And as far as secondary stacks, as Adam said, there are pros and cons to having some kind of stack rule with the secondary stack. I do sometimes set a rule of like max 2 gap for if I'm doing just a 2-man secondary stack, but I go back and forth about whether that's actually a good idea because of the reasons that Adam just said of like, yeah, you're going to get to stacks that other people are more likely to have, and some stacks, like some teams, you're just not going to get to as the mini stack because you set that rule, because some of the like best options at like in terms of like positionality and projection are going to be more than 2 apart from each other.
Yeah, and I think one other thing to add, I didn't see if he said how many lineups he plays, but I did see the like single entry 150 max stuff come up. Certainly, you can be more if you're playing like one or 2 or 3 lineups or whatever. You can be much more picky about what you're trying to do. If I'm playing a set of 150 lineups or 50 or even like 20, I'm not setting any sort of rules like that. But like if you're hand building a lineup or you're building one lineup, then yeah, it probably makes sense, assuming you're not giving up a bunch elsewhere, but to be like, okay, well, I'll, stack the 3 and 4 hitter instead of the 3 and 8 hitter because I'm playing one lineup and that is more likely to succeed. Not even necessarily because of the correlation, just because, if you can get to them, the 4 hitter is almost always going to be better than the 8 hitter. So like, there's, if you're playing one lineup, you obviously can be more picky about what you're doing. But as a general rule, like even in one lineup, if I just had a lineup I really like, and let's just say, because we just talked about the game and it's at the top of my head, let's just say like I'm game stacking the Orioles and Pirates. I have whatever 2 pitchers I want. Everything fits in perfectly. But in my mini stack for the Pirates, I have Brian Reynolds, the 2-hitter, Jack Sawinski, the 6-hitter, and Ji-Hwan Bae, the 8-hitter. And that's the only way I can make this game stack work with the pitching I want. Like even in one lineup, cool, whatever. I don't really want, like, it's not the perfect, 2, 6, 8 isn't the perfect stack. I don't really love, Bae individually, but like he fits, whatever. Let's hope to get lucky there, because no matter who you replace them with, you're still hoping to get lucky. It's baseball. Like they're going to fail so often, no matter what name you put in there.
Yep, exactly. I think that's a very good answer. I think that we've talked about it enough for a 13-game slate. We're only through 2 games, so we will move on. But feel free, if you have any more questions, we will hit them as we go. I'm sure some of these games we'll get through pretty quick, and others will take a little more time. The next game on the slate is Tampa Bay at the Yankees. We've got Trevor Kelly on the mound for the Rays, Garrett Cole for the Yankees. Adam, what is your level of interest in these pitchers?
So I don't know anything about Trevor Kelly, except it looks like he is being backed up by Josh Fleming. He pitches for the Rays, so I feel comfortable saying he's good, probably. And if not, they will make him good in the next 6 months. But not looking to the pitching from Tampa Bay. You do actually have a 4.8 implied run total for the Yankees, which is kind of surprising for me, just given that the Rays are the Rays. Garrett Cole on the other side, though, tough matchup against Tampa. He's expensive at 12K, but he is also still Garrett Cole, striking out 28.6% of hitters this year, 2.61 FIP. Hasn't had the home run issues so far that he has in previous years. That's likely to turn around. But in terms of expected ISO, he's actually been really good. It's not even like he's getting super lucky. Sub 100 expected ISO to left-handed hitters so far this year, 135 to righties. That's not to say that he's, figured it out and he's not going to have home run issues like he has pretty much his entire career. But so far, he's actually been good there too. So if you can get to Garrett Cole, great. He's second in top 2 pitcher percentage, 27% ownership, 22% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. One thing that does really stand out, and it makes his price tag a little bit more palatable on DraftKings and on FanDuel, because you see the same thing, is that pricing on pitching was actually pretty aggressive today. So my first thought when I saw Cole at 12K against Tampa was like, that's not, it's still Cole, the ceiling's there, but like that's a hell of a price tag, and you can probably find some other really high upside guys. But Spencer Strider is $200 more expensive. It's the same thing on FanDuel. Cole comes in at 11.3, Strider comes in at 11.5. So that is nice, at least, where they're actually forcing you to pay all the way up at pitcher, and they're not giving you an easy out where it's like, well, you have to pay all the way up if you want Garrett Cole, but you can get a better strikeout pitcher for $2,000 less than Spencer Strider. Right. So it is nice to see that both sites actually went that route. So, if you can get to Cole, great. It's going to put a bigger emphasis on value bats when you do have the expensive pitching here, and you don't have a very strong mid-range either. Like looking down some of these, there are a few, but looking down some of the other names that are pitching today, it's just like, shit, I do not really want these guys. So it does, I guess, make, we talked about the Nats so far as being a team that's cheap and stands out in terms of value percentage. It does make them a little bit more valuable than they have been on a lot of slates this year. There's been a lot of slates where it's like, oh, well, the Nats are really, the Nats or whatever, mediocre offense with like a 4 implied run total is pretty cheap, but you don't really need them because pitching's so underpriced. Today, getting to those Luis Garcia, Keibert Ruiz type guys actually could be a little bit more beneficial so that you can get to, Cole and Strider, who are at the top of pitching by a pretty wide margin.
Right. Any interest in playing the Rays against Cole, or tell me about your level of interest in the bats in this game?
Yeah, pretty low on Tampa. I'm never opposed to getting a power bat or two against Cole, but like I said, he has done a better job this year limiting power. The bigger thing, though, is just that you have 26 teams playing. We've gotten so many 6, 7, 8 game slates this year where it's like, well, I don't like the spot, but you're getting unowned Tampa, and most teams are, most teams have some ownership. Tampa doesn't. They're still a really good offense. Here with 25 other teams to choose from, it just makes it that much more difficult to get to them. The caveat does still apply. I think I tweeted it out the other day. If every slate you play, you just stack whatever you can of the Rays, the Orioles, and the Dodgers, and I think somebody added the Rangers to that list, which was fine. You're just like printing money. I think like ignore the matchup, stack the Rays, stack the Dodgers, stack the Orioles, move on with your day. You're probably doing pretty well so far this year. So there is that. But again, it's even if you're playing 150 lineups, you have to, that is a pretty finite number of combinations you can make. Tampa Bay is a pretty tough one to get to.
Yeah. And Larry C says, thoughts on starters going against the same team on back-to-back starts. I see Cole pitched against Tampa last game. I mean, it's a negative, I guess, but it's not something I factor in.
Yeah, I don't factor in. I think it is. I'm pretty sure the work's been done on it, and I don't know the specific numbers off the top of my head. What I vaguely remember is that you do see a drop off the second time for the pitchers, but also not to the extent where like I've ever done anything with it in fantasy.
Okay, that's makes sense. Can you rank the 4 sides of this game?
So it didn't talk about the Yankees specifically. This is one of those spots where I'm surprised how high the implied run total is. We've had a lot of those spots recently, and I think every single time I've said it, it's actually come through. So except for the one time with the Padres. But other than that, it's been like, yeah, well, this is why I trust data and not my intuition when I first look at a line. Yeah. Fleming's been okay this year. Sub 100 expected ISO to righty so far, only striking them out 7.5% of the time. But you do have Judge back in the lineup, so that's nice. 4.8 implied run total. Like the Yankees look fine. They're coming in middle of the pack and top stack percentage at 3%, 3% projected ownership. That's like the majority of this slate is between like 2 and 5% top stack percentage. So
Yep.
they're just another offense that looks okay. As far as ranking this game, I think it's Cole 1, Yankees 2, Rays 3. No real pitching for Tampa.
Okay, perfect. So we're through 3 games of 13. Let me take a break to tell you about our sponsor, Sorare, and of course, sadly, cannot show you my lineup because I do not have my phone. I can't find my old phone. I didn't really look for it very long before the show started because I did not realize I was going to be locked out. So sadly, I'm going to not be able to show you my team. But if you are new to Sorare, you haven't yet played Sorare, I can tell you exactly what I would do. If you are going to sign up for Sorare for the first time, getting these free cards today, I'd be playing some Phillies. I'd be trying to get some Phillies and some Rockies into my lineup. Those are the cards that I would probably choose as I'm signing up. And of course, if you want some real strategy talk about Sorare, myself and Greg Ehrenberg did a full half-hour strategy show on Sorare MLB yesterday. So if you want some strategy talk, go there. But yeah, if you are just signing up for Sorare for the first time, you're going to get the option of several free common cards that you can then enter into contests to win other cards, the limited cards that you can actually sell. If you are doing that for the first time today, I highly recommend targeting Phillies and Rockies, and of course, pitchers who are projected to start this weekend, just so you can get a win right away because we've got a Coors slate here. The Phillies are going to be going against Rockies pitchers, of course. So I would be, if you can get to some Phillies bat cards, I would absolutely go after those and then just find a couple pitchers who are actually going to play this weekend. So that would be my suggestion for if you're targeting Sorare for the first time today. But again, I just put the link into chat. You can find it in the description of this video if you are not watching live. Today, I think it's a great time to sign up for Sorare. I'm glad that Greg and I set a lineup because I'm like, I don't know what time it actually locks today, so I don't. I'm glad I've got one in there already. So thanks to Greg for helping me set that up yesterday. But yeah, again, if you are going to try Sorare for the first time today, use the link in the description, please. Yeah, and Larry says Strider is a cheat code this weekend. That's only in the limited contest, though, because in the limited contest, you can play Strider at relief pitcher. I don't think you have that option in the common contest because you only have the cards from, I guess if you got it last year, it would be a way to do that. But I think he's only eligible in starting pitcher, possibly. Otherwise, yeah, absolutely a cheat code when you can play him at relief pitcher, as I'm going to be doing in the limited contest. All right, on to the next game of this slate, Adam. We've got Atlanta at Toronto. Spencer Strider on the mound for the Braves. Chris Bassett for the Blue Jays. What's your level of interest in these pitchers?
Very high in Strider. Not the best matchup, obviously. And this makes, again, the pitching on the slate just even more interesting because when you look at a lot of the names, you see that, Strider and Cole are the ones you'd really expect to stand out, but then you have them facing Tampa Bay and Toronto. So it's kind of like you're still taking on risk. But, I've said it before, Strider just offers so much in the way of strikeout upside. And a lot of times that's what's giving you floor in DFS. People focus on implied run totals and preventing runs as safety when you can still just sort of, get BABIP to death and run really bad. And if you don't have the ability to rack up strikeouts and make up for those unlucky runs that you allow, it's tough to get back in and put up a good fantasy score. Somebody like Strider, he can give up a few solo shots to a good Blue Jays lineup. And if he's just going to strike out 40% of the other hitters he faces, he's still going to give you a workable score. So right. It does, even in a tough matchup, that strikeout percentage does. It's the closest thing you're going to find in DFS to actually giving you a floor is getting a pitcher like this that strikes out more than a third of the guys that he faces. So he looks really good. He's slightly more expensive than Cole. As I said before, we have him projected about a little over a point higher. He's projected for 20% ownership compared to 27 for Cole. 25% chance of being a top 2 pitcher compared to 22 for Cole. Those numbers make me want to get to Strider before I get to Cole. But again, you're kind of just splitting hairs there. They're both really, really good options. On the other side, Bassett only pulling 4% ownership, 6% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. 8,200 in a tough matchup against Atlanta. He's a decent pitcher, 19.5% strikeout percentage. He has struggled this year at pretty much everything. He's walking 12% of hitters, 5.33 FIP, 1.35 home runs per 9. Strikeout percentage at 19.5% is down from the 21.5 to 22% he was at last year. Not to say he's not going to figure it out. We're like a quarter of the way into the season, and he's got a pretty long track record of being decent, but you're not getting any sort of real discount on him based on what he's done this year. He's got a tough matchup with Atlanta outside of just saying, well, he's 4% owned. Maybe he'll pitch well. I have a hard time making a case for him.
Makes sense. And then we've got two of the better offenses in baseball in obviously a really tough matchup for the Blue Jays, but then, Braves get Chris Bassett. What's your level of interest in these offenses?
The Braves look somewhat interesting. They're a good offense. They're facing a pitcher that has struggled a bit this year. Bassett's allowed a 216 expected ISO to lefties, only 143 to righties, not really striking out either side at a high clip. For the Braves, you're getting, Matt Olson with a ton of power from the left side. Rosario is cheap. Ozzie Albies will be hitting from the left side. Harris is cheap toward the bottom of the order. You shouldn't shy away from the righties here because they're so good. Murphy's going to always be one of the highest upside catching options. Riley, same for third base. Acuna, obviously, always one of the best plays on a slate. So the righties here are fine too, but Bassett has not surprisingly had a little bit more issues with lefties. From a top stack standpoint, Atlanta's coming in 8th in top stack percentage, 2% projected ownership because they're so expensive, 4% chance of being the top stack. If you sort by stack score so that the value component is factored in, Atlanta falls back towards the middle. They come in it looks like 11th or 12th in stack score. So everything considered, probably correctly owned, maybe a little bit under-owned. Matt Olson individually, though, looks really, really, really good.
Somebody just predicted a double dong for Matt Olson in chat. Yeah, Michael Knack says Olson double dong. So there's a prediction there. Do you have any thoughts on Strider to go over 8.5 strikeouts? Matt Panabianco wants to know.
I haven't looked at any strikeout projections.
Yeah, I have also not looked at any.
I can quickly try and just get some feel for it. I don't, without knowing what I would want plus odds if I'm going over 8.5.
Okay. Makes sense. All right. I was just looking it up in BetPro, seeing if we have anything that I can find quickly, but we've got 13 games to get through, so I can't spend a ton of time there. But yeah, that seems like a, reasonable line there. How would you rank the 4 sides of this game?
Strider, Braves, Bassett, I guess, just because hitting is really hard. And then Blue Jays.
Okay. Michael Mass says, "Hi guys, just saying hello. I'll have to watch later." Yeah, thanks for checking in. Hopefully you can win some money watching later. I also want to say DFIC is in chat, and I didn't mention DFIC just won $3,000 last night. Congrats to you, DFIC. Looked like he used something that we saw a lot when we were looking through lineup generator yesterday, which is pitchers with the stacks. Both of his pitchers, I think, were with his stacks, as I recall from his screenshot. It was cut off a little bit, so I don't know what the full stack looked like, but it's kind of cool to see, what we were seeing working in lineup generator yesterday is something that DFIC used to have some success. So congrats to you, DFIC. I forget what your first name. I knew at one point what DFIC's first name was. I think his last name is Fashina or something like that. At one point, he had it posted somewhere. I think it's Fashina or something a little bit different than Fick, but I could be wrong about that.
I always just think of Robert Fick every time he says something.
I don't know who that is.
He used to play for the Tigers.
Oh, okay. Next up, we've got the Angels at the Guardians. Tyler Anderson on the mound for the Angels. Logan Allen for the Guardians. You playing either of these pitchers, Adam?
Oh, there it is. Probably not. Logan Allen, 7,800 in the top pitchers tool, coming in 5th highest at 12%. He is 8%. He's getting 8% ownership, so going a little bit under owned. Decent price tag. Still not really enamored with getting him. You're getting the Angels outside of Anaheim, which is good for Allen. I guess if you have to get there as a mid-range pitcher, it's okay. He has struck out 26% of righties this year, 29% of lefties, limited sample. Has had power issues as well. If you go back, wow, he hasn't pitched in the majors since 2020. No, 20. Oh, okay. I must be thinking of some. Did the Guardians have 2 Logan Allens?
I don't know. I'm
aware
aware of
they
one.
had a Logan Allen previously. Yeah. All right. So there's a Logan Allen that pitched for Cleveland from 2019 to 2022, and then there's this Logan Allen. So yeah,
I never knew that it was a new person.
Yeah. So this is a 24-year-old prospect.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely more interested in this guy. I was really confused why the Logan Allen I was thinking of was 5th in top pitcher tool. So this guy does have good strikeout stuff. This is his rookie year. He's made 3 starts in the majors, 3 starts at AAA this year, 14 starts at AAA last year. The bat projects him to strike out about 22% of hitters. Zips is at 23%. I've mentioned it before. The bat's usually pretty bearish on rookies, so that's actually a pretty solid projection from them for him. So 7,800, the strikeout stuff here is good. The matchup's not great, but the strikeout stuff has been there for him so far in the majors. He's also giving up a lot of power. So it's a very volatile, boom or bust spot. I do like the lack of ownership coming into him, given the strikeout stuff. Whenever you get a pitcher that strikes out a lot of hitters, but also gives up a lot of power, if they are popular, I like taking the bats on the other side. If they're not popular, I like taking the pitcher. On a slate like this too, where the mid-range leaves a lot to be desired, like looking at pitching Allen's coming in at 7,800 on DraftKings. Looking at pitching in that price range, you have Blake Snell against the Dodgers. Snell obviously has his own issues, and then also he's facing the Dodgers. Martin Perez against Oakland, good matchup. Martin Perez, not a great strikeout pitcher at all. Dustin May, not a good strikeout pitcher at 8,500 facing the Padres. We just talked about Bassett against the Braves. We already talked about McGill against Washington. You have Kopech against Houston. Like, there's not a lot in the mid-range here that's inspiring confidence. And so that combined with an 8% Logan Allen does make me pretty interested in chasing that strikeout upside.
Okay. And what about the bats?
So if you're in non-Logan Allen lineups, I do think the Angels are still interesting. They do only have a 4 implied run total, which again, I think is another reason to look towards Allen. But you have Mike Trout, Rendon, who, not hitting for a lot of power, but he's also $3,300 now. Renfroe, Drury, Taylor Ward. They're pretty inexpensive as well. Trout's 5,600, Ohtani 6,100 on DraftKings. No other hitter in this lineup is above 4,400, and that's Renfroe. No other hitter is above 3,700 in their projected lineup. So this is a lineup where they're not super likely to succeed, but you can probably build a pretty strong team around them because of how relatively cheap they are. And you still have a high ceiling in this stack because you're getting a pitcher making his 4th major league start who has had power issues, and there is still plenty of volatility here. So I think the Allen side is going a bit underowned. I think the Angel side is going a bit underowned as well. Right now, we only have them pulling 2% ownership. This kind of strikes me like the Brandon Pfaadt Marlins game the other day.
Yep.
Where we talked about it a lot. I ended up basically just jamming the Marlins on that slate. They did okay, but it was basically just Chisholm and Soler.
Would have been a great secondary stack.
Yeah. They were perfect 2-man, and the full stack sucked. But it's the same kind of thing here. Like, you have a really good strikeout pitcher on, or at least a good strikeout pitcher on a slate with pretty weak pitching, and you have a team with a bunch of power and on the other side, and nobody's going to roster either of them. So I like getting to one side, both sides. If you're playing multiple lineups, there's a lot of unowned upside here.
Sure. Interesting. So how would you rank the 4 sides then?
And as far as the other side, Anderson, not a great strikeout pitcher. He is really cheap at 5,500. If you wanted to just go the pay all the way down for SP2 because I hate the mid-range pitching route, that's fine. He's pulling 13% ownership. In that case, you're not really expecting Anderson to be a top 2 pitcher. He's 4.5% to do that. You're just hoping he gets you 14, 15 points. And your offenses, your expensive bats come through. So if you're going to a team like Atlanta, for example, Tyler Anderson could probably be pretty useful. Pair him with Strider. That way you're only spending 17-7 at pitcher, and you can do whatever you want with bats. So Anderson, you're not excited about him, but at that price tag, he is a little bit underpriced. The Cleveland bats, I actually don't really like that much here. I'm a little surprised the implied run total is as high as it is. You do have a lot of switch hitters here, so you're going to get a still predominantly right-handed lineup with Ramirez and Bell hitting from the right side. But Anderson's not terrible at limiting power. So far this year, or since the start of last year, rather, 141 expected ISO to righties. I think the Guardians are just sort of middle of the pack for me. They are middle of the pack in top stack percentage, not getting much ownership. So similarly owned to the Angels, but I actually think that there's a little bit more upside, for lack of a better word, in the Angels bats. So I would rank this probably Logan Allen 1, Angels 2, Anderson 3, in the sense of I think he's the 3rd most likely to give you a big game, or he's actually probably 4th most likely to give you a big game, but the value moves him up a little bit, and then the Guardians 4th. Really tough game to rank though. To some extent, I'm interested in every side of it.
Okay. Adam, we've got through 5 games in about 40 minutes. We've got 8 more to get through. So hopefully we can find some that we are less interested in here in the back end. I do agree with Paul Mia. Yeah, if you're not familiar with the Brady Feigl minor leaguers, it is bizarre that they have the same name and look almost identical. Very, very strange there. All right, we will move right on to the next game, which is St. Louis at Boston. Adam Wainwright for the Cardinals, James Paxton for the Sox. Any interest? Apparently. Any interest in either of these pitchers?
Not particularly. They're both coming in very close to the bottom of the top pitchers tool. Neither one is super cheap. 7,400 to Wainwright, 7,700 for Paxton. Wainwright, 3% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. Paxton, 3% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. Not particularly interested in chasing either of the pitchers that are returning from injury.
Easy.
All right. This is Wainwright's second start, but same point.
Okay. What about the bats against them?
Some interest there just because you're getting two pitchers that I think are pretty big question marks. Wainwright struggled in his first start. He did throw 90 pitches, but struggled in his first start. And, he is somebody where he's been solid for years, but the dude's old and eventually he's just not going to have it anymore. We've talked about it with Zach Greinke a lot where like at some point they do fall off of a cliff, even if they are good enough pitchers that they're able to prolong their careers. So there is some upside there. Boston coming in 6th in stack score, pulling 8.5% ownership, so going a little bit over owned, but 6% chance to be in the top stack as well. St. Louis, more difficult, I think, actually they're first in top stack score, which surprises me. I thought they were a little bit more difficult to make a case for, but they're getting 12% ownership. They're first in stack score. 8% chance to be in the top stack is one of the higher numbers on the slate as well. So, yeah, I guess the Cardinals look fine, probably going a little bit over owned. They do have a 5.5 implied run total. So do the Red Sox. Looks like it's supposed to be like 80 degrees in Fenway with the wind blowing out too. So I'm sure that helps the offenses a bit.
Sure. And then how would you rank the 4 sides of the game?
Cardinals 1, Red Sox 2, Cardinals 3, Red Sox 4.
Okay. So now we have 7 games left to talk about. We aren't going to spend a ton of time looking at lineup generator just because we have so much to look at. But I'm going to show you just a little bit. First, I want to show you here is the 2 Brady Feigls you can see on my screen right now, just how bizarre it is. These guys are not related. I believe that is what we ultimately learned, is that the Brady Feigls are not related. But yeah, absolutely bizarre there. But I do want to look quickly at lineup generator, which you can get currently right now for just $4.50 for a full week. That's less than a cup of coffee if you go to Starbucks. Maybe at home it's a little bit cheaper than $4.50, but it's a really cheap price tag to take a look at lineup generator for a week. It's going to show you how to make some great lineups. I'm putting the link in chat right now. If you have not yet signed up for lineup generator, I think you should do it right now because it's $4.50 for a week for your first week. And then it's going to be $9 a week after that, which is still $9 a week. It's giving you your great lineups. It's showing you exactly the types of lineups you want to make. So we're going to look at DraftKings. I'm just going to go all stack types, let it do its thing. So we've been doing balanced lineups. I'm going to actually go contrarian here, see what some contrarian lineups look like. We do have, maybe not. Since it's a 13-game slate, I think I'm still more inclined to just go to some balanced lineups.
That's typically where I lean.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about it before, but like that option's really good for because it's a way that you can sort of factor in what contests you're playing. Like if you're playing a single entry, you probably just want a chalkier lineup.
Right.
If you're playing like the huge large field lottery, you could make a case for contrarian. I think that I would probably still go balanced more often, but that's a really good way to be able to get it to create lineups for you based on what you're playing.
Would you lock any of these pitchers, Adam?
I would generally never lock anybody.
Yeah.
I guess like this is one where, like if you're playing one lineup and you want to play Spencer Strider, then sure. But I think I'd prefer to take the approach where I let it generate lineups for me and see what it's giving me.
Yeah.
And because you can always just skip the lineup. Like if you really want Strider and it gives you a lineup with like Cole instead, you can either switch Cole to Strider and see how it looks, or just go to the next one. But I think, especially if I haven't run it yet, I really just want to see what it's spitting out because, it's got a lot more information and it's going, working for it than like you just looking and saying, well, I think this is what a good lineup should look like. Like, why not build the lineups and say like, okay, this is what good lineups look like today.
Yep. It's the same thing for me. Like if I'm using an optimizer, I want to let the optimizer do his thing. Same thing with lineup generator. Like if the more plus EV lineups are using, Sonny Gray, it's going to tell me that. So I don't want to lock in Spencer Strider and then not get to Sonny Gray. I want to let it do its thing, let it work. So yeah, we're going to not choose. We're not going to lock in any pitchers. It could be useful if you want to like take a sampling of like, I'm going to have 5 Spencer Strider lineups and then 5 Garrett Cole lineups. Like you could do it that way. But in general, I just want to let it do its thing. So we're going to skip locking anybody and just see what it gives us. First lineup we get to Spencer Strider and Johan Oviedo. You talked about him a little bit as somebody who's going kind of under owned at 1% projected ownership. This is actually a fairly low owned lineup overall. We're getting a lot of like 1% owned players here.
13 games late.
13 games late. Yeah, that's a good point. And we're still getting like a 22% owned Trey Turner. We're getting 18% owned JT Realmuto. So not all contrarian and 15% Bryce Harper.
Yeah, I don't love the pairing of the Oakland stack with Oviedo, just because like it feels a little bit unnecessary. But
right.
I think it's probably also because. So the thing I do like is we haven't talked about them yet, but Phillies are the most likely team to be the top scoring stack.
Right.
and they're relatively expensive, particularly the guys we're getting to. Sosa's obviously cheap, but Turner, Harper, Real Muto, like you're getting to the strong part of the Phillies lineup, and you're getting to Spencer Strider. So like
right.
that is kind of pushing you in a direction where like I was saying, we talked about Strider and Cole. The pricing on pitching today actually makes you make decisions, which I think is really fun. I like there being a reason to play a lineup like this. Pricing for the most part hasn't been like that this year. That's why my first take when I looked at it was like, why do we need Oakland at this point? But it was like, because you're trying to fit Strider and the Phillies. So I do like that, and it's another reason why I recommend looking at the lineups before you put any sort of manual take on it.
Yep.
Because this is giving you a build that my first thought was like, this doesn't make a ton of sense. But then when you think through like the entire slate and what you're getting in the pricing, it's like, oh, that's what the slate's actually giving you. It's not what I would have actually like anticipated when I at first look, though.
Yeah, exactly. It's just interesting to see what it gives you. And again, and I see Dennis for yes, wait. So I can get a lineup without doing anything other than paying money. Yeah, and these are lineups that we have already found. The Stokastic Sims have run. Stokastic team has run sims, 10,000 sims, to see which lineups are plus EV across 10,000 slates, and every one of these lineups is going to be plus EV. These are beating the rake. They're actually making money over the long term, which is hard to do with the rake on DraftKings, FanDuel. You got to be pretty good to beat the rake, and we're getting lineups here that actually beat the rake, and you have to put in some settings. So you're not just getting lineups. You do have to say, like, do I want chalky, contrarian? Do I want to lock in pitchers, etc. So you're taking some control over, but still, every lineup you're going to get in the lineup generator is a plus EV lineup according to these Stokastic Sims.
Yeah, anybody that's like watched our shows for a while, like me and Josh will talk about, sort of building lineups and then doing some stuff, on the back end to play the best lineups we can. This tool is basically just doing the stuff me and Josh are referring to, not the same stuff me and Josh do, because Steve and whoever built this are better than me and Josh. So it's doing better things than me and Josh do on the back end, but like it's giving you those lineups that are just good, and you don't have to say, well, I know some of these lineups I built are good, some are bad, now how do I figure out which ones? I kind of laugh when we rolled this tool out, because like people, ever since I started doing content, people are like, well, why do you do content if you're a winning DFS player? Like, aren't you worried about giving away edge, blah blah? And I'm like, nobody's gaining that much on me by watching my shows. Tools like this, though, I could do without existing. But it's good, and it's taking a lot of the it's taking a lot of the time that you have to put in out. It's making you more efficient, if you're busy. But two, it's alleviating a lot of the potential mistakes you could make.
Right. Exactly. It's not going to give you any bats against your pitcher. It's not going to give you just bad bats overall, and it's going to balance out your lineup with chalky bats with some contrarian bats. It's doing all the balancing that we try to do in our lineups. It does it for us. So very cool tool. And I'll just show you. I mean, and you can look at several lineups. As I've mentioned before, I also think it's just kind of a cool tool for like learning how to play. Like if you haven't had a lot of success at DFS, it kind of shows you what good lineups look like. So even if you don't want to just take the lineups that are given here, and by the way, we have talked about, like, I know there have been people who have concerns about, like, well, are we going to get the same lineups as other people using lineup generator? And that's not really a concern. There's like, I don't forget what the number is, but there's tons of different lineups in here. So you're probably like, it's not going to be repeating lineups where you just end up everybody playing the same lineups here. Very cool tool to show you what the types of lineups that have success over many, many sims. I think it's 10,000, might be even more than 10,000 at this point. But you can see here, we get Spencer Strider again, now with Garrett Cole. The last stack was a 4-4 stack because I allowed every type of stack. Let's see, this one we've got, this must be a 5-0 stack, five-man San Francisco stack with then Tyrone Taylor from Milwaukee, Edmund Sosa from the Phillies, and Donovan Solano from the Twins. So we've got a 5-0 stack here. Again, though, this is found to be plus EV already, and it's only giving you plus EV lineup. So very cool tool. Unfortunately, we don't have time to really go through a ton of lineups here, but you can, and I'll show you what happens after you've saved 20 lineups, or after you've just gone through 20 lineups, it will show you the exact exposures of the lineups that you saved. So if you only saved 5 of them, it'll show you which players you have in those 5. And like if you have 100% of Spencer Strider, for example, and you don't want to have 100% of Spencer Strider, then you can go back, and if you have not saved 20, you can go and get more lineups, and then at that point, look for the lineups that don't have the player that you have 100% of. So really cool tool, and you can also swap out players within the tool. Very fun way to play, and especially if you're not very experienced, it's going to make some plus EV lineups for you. So check it out. It is, again, it's $450 for your first week if you use the link that I just put in chat. It's also in the description of this video. If you're not watching live, you can find the link. Follow that link and you're going to get this for 50% off for your first week. So just $4.50 for your first week. Really great deal for a tool that's just going to give you some winning lineups. All right, Adam, back to the slate. Next up, we have the Cubs at the Twins. We've got Drew Smyly on the mound for the Cubs, Sonny Gray for the Twins. What's your level of interest in these pitchers?
Sonny Gray, $10,000, won me a bet at one point years ago. Happy to get to him. I mean, there's some sticker shock there because, he has 10K. Normally he lives in that like upper 8K, low 9K range, but you have to keep in mind everything's relative, and Spencer Strider and Garrett Cole aren't coming in at 10.8 or 11.2 or whatever they normally are. They're coming in at 12K and 12.2. So it's all relative there, and you're still getting a pretty substantial discount going to him. Decent spot against the Cubs, 3.3 implied run total, one of the lower implied run totals on the slate. Looks like wind's blowing in a bit in Minnesota. It's supposed to be like 70 degrees. So enjoy your nice weather today. But yeah, Gray looks good. And he's only getting 17% ownership, 17% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, but also, more, offers that savings where, when we just were looking at the lineup generator, right? You had Strider with the Phillies and an A stack. What if you want a team that doesn't suck as your second stack? You can go from Strider down to Gray. You don't have the same upside or floor. Like, obviously you're getting a worse pitcher, but you're still getting a good pitcher. And MLB DFS tournaments are typically going to be won by your hitters because just of how the scoring works. There's so much more volatility in bats and the scoring there, outside of complete game shutouts and, your occasional, 12, 13, 14 strikeout games. Pitchers can really only distance themselves so much from other pitchers. So like a lot of the time you're going to get, a good 24-point outing from Strider, and Gray's going to go get like 18 points. And it's going to be like, okay, cool. I needed to get an extra double from a hitter, like big deal. So I think you can probably build some really strong lineups where Gray is lower owned than Cole and even Strider by a little bit, still gives you a nice ceiling, decent matchup, and you're just turning that A stack into a team that can hit. So I do actually think Gray is pretty interesting in tournaments. On the other side, Smyly coming in at 9,100. That's a really, really tough sell for me. He's an okay pitcher. He's the kind of guy where on this slate, if you were like 7,500 or something, he'd probably be pretty popular, and I would think he was a good play. But at 9,100, like, what are you really getting by going to Smyly? I'm sure now he's going to have the best game of his career, but you're not talking about a great strikeout guy. You're not talking about a guy that's like great at limiting runs or working deep in the games or anything. He doesn't do anything exceptionally well. So you're kind of just paying for a dude hoping he has like an outlier game.
Against the Twins too, just a great lineup. You don't want to be playing Drew Smyly.
Yeah, exactly.
What about the bats in this game?
Not a ton of interest in the bats. I don't typically like taking bats against Gray. On the other side for Minnesota, 4.2 implied run total. I mentioned the wind blowing in, obviously not ideal for them. They do have some decent pricing. The lineup gets really cheap once you get to Kyle Farmer hitting cleanup. Now, Kyle Farmer hitting cleanup is a problem in and of itself, but you do get a cheap lineup for the most part. Even Correa at 4,300 is a reasonable price tag. Same for Polanco at 4,600. You could put any price tag on Byron Buxton and it's still going to be a solid play. So they are kind of interesting as a value stack, but I don't love the hitting weather. I don't love the run total here. Smiley's not bad. 161 expected ISO to righties since last year, 120 so far this year. So yeah, I mean, if you use the Twins as filler, I think that's fine. I would get to them before I got to the Cubs, but Minnesota coming in 6th from the bottom in stack score, Cubs coming in 3rd from the bottom.
Okay. How would you rank the 4 sides of the game?
Gray 1, Twins 2, Cubs 3, Smyly 4, I guess.
Okay. Kobe Travis says, great job not spending too much time on lineup generator. Trolling us. Yes, sorry. I'm excited about it. It's a new tool. I think everybody else, people are excited. It's a brand new this week. People are having success with it. Somebody just won 15,000 like 2 nights ago in NBA using the NBA lineup generator. MLB lineup generator to me is I'm even more excited about the MLB lineup generator. So can't help it.
I'll put my ego aside and say that any amount of time spent on the lineup generator as opposed to like me talking is the most valuable part of the show.
Yeah, I think it's a very valuable tool, and people should be checking it out. And it's just $4.50 a week. So again, yeah, I know we took longer than I expected to, but we will move on. Next up, we have Houston at the White Sox. JP France on the mound for the Astros. Michael Kopech for the White Sox. Any interest in these pitchers, Adam?
I'm a little surprised France isn't getting any ownership just because of the context of this slate. He went 5 innings, 84 pitches in his first start. He got decent strikeout stuff at the minor league level. I'm not convinced that he's anything special, but you would just have that lack of mid-range talent, and this guy at least can get some strikeouts. He at AAA this year, 5 games, 3 starts, 19 in the third innings pitched, struck out 33.8% of hitters. Last year at AAA, 34 games, 15 starts, 110 innings pitched, struck out 28.3%. So there is at least some strikeout stuff here. The bat projects him for a 23.2% strikeout percentage. Zips is at 24.8%. He's 7,600. He's pulling 1% ownership. Yeah, I mean, this is just another one where I don't think he's a great player or anything, but it's kind of like Logan Allen, I guess, where there is at least some upside here, and the price tag is reasonable. The matchup is okay. The White Sox have a 4.1 implied run total here. Not like it's the craziest thing. So I do have some interest in an unowned JP France as an SP2 option.
Okay. And then what about the bats in this game?
Houston looks pretty good going up against Kopech, former very highly regarded pitching prospect that hasn't lived up to the hype so far. This year, 27.8% strikeout percentage against lefties. That's good. That's the only thing that I'm going to mention that's good, because when he's not striking them out, he's allowed a 314 expected ISO, 426 expected WOBA. Good luck getting Kyle Tucker and Yordan Alvarez out with that lack of stuff. And then the righties only striking out at a 15.4% clip, still like 295 expected ISO and 416 expected WOBA there. These numbers probably come back down simply because if they don't, he's going to be going back to AAA or released. But he hasn't been good at doing anything except striking out lefties. And it's not like he's been good overall against lefties. He's still getting absolutely destroyed. So Houston looks good here. In terms of stack score, they are coming in 7th. Most of that's just because they are relatively expensive. But 7% aggregate ownership, 5% chance to be in the top stack. Pena is going to be a really strong shortstop option. Bregman looks good at third. Again, Alvarez and Tucker are just two massive ceiling plays. And then you're sort of grabbing one other Houston guy and just hoping for the best. They are cheap, the rest of the team. Like Pena, Bregman, Alvarez, Tucker are all fantastic hitters. You're really, really happy to play them. Everybody else is just like, shit, why is this guy in my lineup? But, Jose Abreu probably hitting cleanup at 2,900. Corey Julks at 2,700, perfectly fine. At least the guys you don't really want are cheap, and they do help to offset the cost of those more expensive guys you're getting to. On the White Sox side, I don't really want to get there too much. You can certainly argue that JP France is a complete unknown, and the White Sox could have some success. They do have some decent hitters in their lineup, but certainly prefer getting to the Astros side.
Okay, and then how would you rank the 4 sides of the game?
Astros 1, France 2, White Sox 3, Kopech 4.
Okay, we've got Kansas City at Milwaukee. Josh Taylor on the mound for the Royals. Corbin Burns for the Brewers. Any interest in these pitchers, Adam?
Yeah, definitely interested in Burns. He's actually projected to be, I believe, the highest owned pitcher on DraftKings. Yeah, 35% ownership coming into Burns. He's like the one mispriced top tier guy, and that's why you're seeing that ownership come in. Only $9,200 price tag on him so far this year, striking out only 19.8% of hitters. That's not good, obviously. Really big gap from what you normally get from him. Not entirely sure what to read into that either, but it is concerning. It is also probably why he's less expensive. Any projection model is going to obviously be factoring in previous years for Burns as well. So he's going to be projected to strike out more than what he has this year. That's correct, and that's how it should be approached. The concern is just like, what if this is who he is now? Then you are playing an overowned Burns at $9,200. But more often than not, this is just going to be a blip on the radar. And even if he doesn't end up being, the massive strikeout guy he was in the past, he's still going to settle in at, 23, 24, 25%, somewhere in there. So
Sure.
Still happy to get the Burns. I do think he's going a little bit overowned. I don't mind moving some of the Corbin Burns exposure I would get to Logan Allen, for example. When you look at the top pitchers tool, 15% chance of being top 2 for Burns, 12% for Allen. Allen getting 1/4 the ownership, and you're saving $1,500 on a slate where you can actually do some stuff with those savings. So again, in tournaments, Sonny Gray is getting half the ownership for $800 more. This is a spot where I do think Burns is going pretty significantly over owned, but the price tag does stand out.
Okay. What about the bats?
Milwaukee looks good. 5.2 implied run total. Good hitters park. They look like one of the better stacks on the slate. We have them. We have them fifth in stack score. 4% chance of being the top stack, but an 11% chance of being the top value stack. Only 3.5% projected ownership is kind of surprising too. So a cheap team in a good hitters park against an unknown pitching. I think the Brewers are really, really interesting.
Yeah. So how would you rank the four sides of the game?
I guess Burns won, but kind of Milwaukee won. Burns won, Milwaukee 2, Kansas City 3, and then I think that's kind of it. Like Josh Taylor isn't supposed to go deep into this game. He hasn't thrown more than 32 pitches in an outing yet this year.
Okay,
he's going 1 or 2 probably.
We can't get too much in this kind of philosophy stuff, but it feels like that's sort of a negative for Milwaukee, that it's going to be a bullpen game. Like in general, I feel like I don't want to play stacks. Like it's not my favorite to play stacks against bullpen games. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. Yeah, I mean it's not ideal. We talked about it yesterday with the Mets. I think it was the Mets, where it's like, I would prefer the Reds.
I was not listening.
Yeah. I think the Reds went with an opener yesterday and then followed it up with Lively. I could be wrong. But it was just it was like you always prefer that the team is just going to start a bad pitcher and the plan is for them to just eat 5 innings.
Right.
Seeing a pitcher your first time up and then automatically getting a new pitcher your second time does suck. But it is still you're never hitting is still really hard, and most starting pitchers are pretty good. So like it's still one of the more favorable spots on the slate. I just would prefer if this guy was going to pitch 5 innings.
Right. And we do still in the top stack tool, 3.5% projected ownership, 11.3% chance of being the top point per dollar stack on the slate, and a 4.2% chance of being top stack overall. So positive leverage in the tools as well. Always good to confirm what you're thinking.
SMP with a good point there. I should have mentioned it. Brousseau is basically the Austin Slater of the Brewers. He's going to project as a very useful piece because he's cheap and hitting in the middle of the order on a team that's likely to score a lot of runs. You better get it in his first 2 or 3 at bats because he's leaving as soon as they go to the bullpen.
Okay. Yeah. Good point there. Good call out. All right. We've still got 4 games left to go. Starting with Coors game, though. We got Phillies at the Rockies. Taijuan Walker on the mound for the Phillies. Austin Gomber for the Rockies. Playing any pitchers in Coors today, Adam?
Not planning on it. If I did, it would be Walker, but I don't really think it's necessary.
Okay. Then we can skip to the bats, which is obviously the more important part of this game. What's your level of interest in the Phillies and the Rockies?
High. I mean, we haven't loved a ton of offenses so far. Phillies 3rd in stack score. They are 1st in top stack percentage. Gomber isn't anything special, especially when you're pitching in Colorado. Since the start of last year for him, 164 expected ISO to righties, 156 to lefties. He's been getting hit harder this year than last year. Again, small sample caveat, but we are like a quarter of the way into the season now. 291 expected ISO to lefties with just a 9% strikeout percentage. Don't sleep on Bryce Harper and Schwarber if you're stacking the Phillies or even as one-offs. Typically, you just naturally are going to get a little bit less ownership than what they otherwise would be because of the lefty-lefty matchup. Shouldn't really matter here. Righties 215 expected ISO. Gomber hasn't been striking out anyone. The Phillies look really, really good. Obviously, they're going to pull some ownership as well, but 13%, really isn't that crazy. That is one of the benefits of a 13-game slate is all the ownership just gets pushed down a bit. On the Colorado side, they're more middle of the pack in stack score. 5.5% chance of being the top stack. 1.5% chance of being the top value stack, but also only 1% projected ownership. Clearly a worse offense than Philadelphia, but this is still a team with a 5.1 implied run total, pulling 1% ownership. So there's certainly interest in getting to them as well. Yeah.
I was noticing that it's that 1% to 5%. That's a nice little gap there for the top stack odds. What's your how would you rank the 4 sides of the game?
Phillies 1, Rockies 2, Walker 3, Gomber 4.
It's funny that we just got through that game so quickly when the Rockies, I will say it's pretty flat across the board in terms of top stack odds. The gap between, so the Phillies have a 14% chance to be in the top stack on the board. Number 2 is St. Louis with an 8% chance. So there is kind of a gap between the Phillies and the rest. And we actually have some positive leverage, 13% projected ownership for the Phillies, 14% chance to be in the top stack, but then only a 1.5% chance to be in the top value stack. But there's not that much you need to say about it. I guess it kind of makes sense that we breeze through it, but
it kind of Coors games are sort of like how sometimes like 2-game or 3-game NBA shows take longer than 12-game NBA,
exactly.
shows, because you have to like dig into every little thing and try and like find an angle. Here it's just like, the bats are good, the pitchers are bad, move on.
Yeah, it's just very straightforward there. All right, 3 games left. San Francisco at Arizona. We've got John Brebbia on the mound for the Giants, Ryan Nelson for the D-backs. What's your level of interest in these pitchers?
None in the Giants. Looks like you should have Stripling as the long reliever. None in Nelson either. I don't know why I worded it like that, but
okay,
yeah, so none.
Okay, and none in Brebbia either. Or sorry, okay, I see what you're saying. How about the bats in this game?
So the bats here they look surprisingly good. This is another one of those games. Like, it has a 10 implied run total. This park isn't particularly good for power. Nelson is okay. The Giants do obviously have plenty of left-handed bats. Only a 9% strikeout percentage to lefties this year for Nelson. He has held them to a 156 expected ISO, but also a 388 expected WOBA. Righties, 270 expected WOBA. But you're going to have plenty of good left-handed bats you can get to in the Giants lineup, with Lamont Wade probably at the top of the order and inexpensive. Jock Peterson's cheap. Michael Conforto's 3,100 on DraftKings. Crawford's 3,100. You have some really, really cheap pricing on the Giants here. So I think that is one reason that they're coming in second in stack score is not only do they have a 7% chance of being the top stack, but also a 9% chance of being the top value stack. So that's making them look pretty good. Arizona, middle of the pack right now, 4% chance of being the top stack, 4% aggregate ownership. I'm a little surprised by the 5-run total here for the Diamondbacks, just because Stripling is supposed to be the long reliever here, and he's not bad. The Diamondbacks, do have a solid enough offense, but the combination of the park and Stripling not being bad kind of surprises me. He struggled a little bit this year. 344 expected ISO to righties, sub 100 to lefties. Since last year, 123 expected ISO to lefties, 300 expected WOBA. Righties, 193 expected ISO, 322 expected WOBA. So you have seen those reverse splits, since the start of last year. The top of this order is always appealing. Rojas, Marte, Carroll, Walker, Gurriel. That's a lot of talent. Moreno's always a pretty high upside catcher option, just because, he can at least hit a bit. Most catchers can't. So I don't mind the Diamondback stack. I'm just a little surprised at the implied run total being as high as it is. But as I've said before, that typically is probably a reason to play them. The fact that
it was counterintuitive,
higher than expected. So yeah, the offenses here I think look pretty good. The pitchers do not.
All right. And how would you rank them?
Giants 1, D-backs 2, Nelson 3, and I don't think you can roster a pitcher from the Giants.
Okay, perfect. Just 2 games left. I do want to say we do still have this BetMGM offer going. I'm going to do this one quickly for real. Get 1 free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum, and your first bet is covered up to $1,000 paid back in bet credits when you sign up, make a deposit, and make your first paid wager at BetMGM. The link is in the description of this video. You can either use that link, it'll put the promo code in for you. Otherwise, you can put in promo code Platinum Sub when you sign up at BetMGM. So if you have not yet signed up at BetMGM and it's legal in your state, make sure you do so using the link in the description of this video or promo code Platinum Sub. Of course, the legal age for gambling in most states is 21 plus. And if you or someone has a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, 2 games left on the slate. Texas at Oakland. We've got Martin Perez on the mound for the Rangers, Ken Waldichuk for the A's. Any interest in the pitchers, Adam?
Not much. It is a good pitcher's park, so you have that. Martin Perez is just priced up to where it's tough to get there. And one thing that stands, he's getting 16% ownership. I think you can make a case for Martin Perez simply because he's facing Oakland in Oakland, and pitching on this slate isn't very good. But if he's going to be the mid-range pitcher everybody's going to, like, this is one of those spots where I think it's like people just factor in matchups a little bit too much, where like Martin Perez doesn't strike guys out and he's 8,300. So, he could just go 6-7 innings of shutout baseball, strike out 5-6 guys and give you a good score. But what does a normal, like, good Martin Perez game look like at 8,300? And how does it help you at 16% owned when you could just play a better strikeout guy like Logan Allen for less at less ownership. You could play JP France at 1/16 the ownership with better strikeout stuff. It's a good spot. Perez is going to project pretty well, but I just think he's going a little bit over owned given the lack of strikeout stuff that he gives you. So far this year, a 17% strikeout percentage, 4.5 FIP, 1.2 home runs per 9. Like, you're just talking about an average to below average pitcher that is pulling ownership at $8,300 on a slate where pricing is actually important simply because he's facing Oakland. Like, I get it. If you were 1% owned, I'd say, like, okay, I kind of like him, but 16% just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. On the other side, Waldichuk is young, has decent stuff, hasn't put it together yet at the major league level. Not particularly interested in getting to him against Texas.
It's funny with Perez. It's like you were saying about Spencer Strider actually has the higher floor just because of the strikeout stuff. It's like it feels like Perez should have the higher floor because he's got the better matchup. Like, oh yeah, he'll go 6 innings and maybe he'll give up 3 earned runs, but like he'll get the innings. But really, it's the strikeouts that gives you the better floor than the actual innings that he's eating. It feels a little bit counterintuitive, but maybe that's why he's getting too much ownership. Well, any interest in the bats here?
Yeah, the Rangers look pretty good against Waldichuk so far this season for Waldichuk. 226 expected ISO, 360 expected WOBA to righties. Don't sleep on the lefties. 330 expected ISO, 436 expected WOBA. Limited sample there, obviously, but even going back to last year, which is still a limited sample, 230 expected ISO, 350 expected WOBA to lefties. You have a good Rangers offense. You have a pitcher that just hasn't figured it out yet. Not a good park to hit in. If this game were in most other places, you would see a implied run total for Texas north of 5 instead of being at 4.8. But still, they're coming in 4th in stack score. Nice combination of chances of success with nearly a 6% chance of being the top stack and value with a 7% chance of being the top value stack. So they just look like a pretty good offense to get to overall. Semien stands out. Josh Young, I really like that price tag on him. But, again, don't sleep on Nathaniel Lowe. And then pretty much the rest of the lineup is going to be right-handed.
Michael Knack calling a Young double dong. All right.
I like that call a lot. The only thing that makes me hesitate is the park. It might be Young doubles twice off the wall.
Right. Yep. How do you rank the 4 sides of this game?
Texas bats 1, Perez 2, I guess Oakland 3, Waldichuk 4. I think you could kind of flip a coin between Oakland and Waldichuk because they're just like the same play. You're like, well, this team, this offense, or this pitcher pretty much suck, but they're also cheap. And if they happen to randomly do well, that puts me in a good spot.
Yep. All right. Final game of this 13-game slate. We've made it here, Adam. We've got the Dodgers and the Padres. Padres at the Dodgers. Blake Snell on the mound for the Padres. Dustin May, Adams twin for the Dodgers. Any interest in these pitchers?
Snell at 7% is like the dream, I guess. But facing the Dodgers is not great. Yeah. It feels like Snell's been like 100% owned every single slate this year. And it's just, he's one of the most difficult guys because he strikes you out at a high clip, but he also walks too many guys, which drives up his pitch count, puts extra guys on base, makes it really tough for him to get deep in the games. Not particularly exciting here. The only thing I would say about Snell, though, is the difference between the Dodgers and the Athletics should not be enough to make Martin Perez double the ownership of Blake Snell at a slightly higher price tag. Like, strikeouts are still king in DFS, and Blake Snell is still much, much better at getting them than Martin Perez is. This year, just shy of a 25% strikeout percentage for Snell. That's down from last year, and it's still like 8 points higher than what Martin Perez is doing. I'm not really advocating for Snell so much as saying, like, if you have a lineup that's pretty chalky and for whatever reason it has Martin Perez, but you're worried about the ownership, you can just turn him into Blake Snell, and at least you're getting an ownership discount there on a similar projected guy. We actually have Snell projected a point higher than Martin Perez at less ownership at a lower price tag. Similarly, Logan Allen projected higher than both of them at less ownership than Perez and a cheaper price tag than both.
Yeah, just like SMP says, Gore and Snell seem super interesting as leverage in that 8K price range, given the strikeout upside they present relative to Perez and maybe even Burns in the builds where you're getting there. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, we have Gore projected right behind Allen. So, basically we have it Strider, Cole, Gray, Burns at the top. And that, I think, is very what everybody would expect. But then it's Logan Allen, Mackenzie Gore, Blake Snell as the next 3 guys. And that is not how ownership is shaking out right now.
Yeah. Interesting. And then what about the bats? Obviously, some of the better bats, Dodgers and Padres. Any interest in playing them today?
Only in the sense, same thing I said about Tampa. If you just stack the Dodgers every slate, you make money.
Right.
But yeah, Dodgers coming in bottom third in stack score. Padres coming in a little bit higher than them, but still bottom half. Neither team looks great. Neither team's getting much ownership. 2% coming into the Padres, 4 to the Dodgers. If you get to them a little bit, fine, but neither guy is a pitcher that I'm very interested in taking bats against.
Larry says, rank the 4 sides of the game first.
This is gross. This is like the opposite of one of those games where everything is bad. Like everything is good, but I don't really like a ton of it. This is one of those games that we talk about a lot where like you have a really high upside pitcher in Snell, a high upside offense in the Dodgers, a high upside offense in the Padres, a good pitcher in May, and the field is just saying, yeah, we don't want any of it.
Right.
But it makes it really hard to rank. I guess I would go Dodgers 1, Snell 2, Padres 3, May 4.
Okay. Larry says, Jordan for my home run pick. I didn't look at the top batters tool at all either. Larry, don't lie to me and don't step on my toes, man. Don't beat me to my home run pick. All right. Top 3 stacks if you're playing a three entry contest.
Probably Phillies, Rangers, Brewers.
3 favorite pitchers.
Strider. So, my 3 favorite pitchers are Strider, Cole, and Gray. In tournaments, so if we're factoring in ownership, I like Strider and Gray. Actually, the way things look right now, I like them more than I like Cole, given that they are lower owned and Gray is less expensive. And then I really like Logan Allen in tournaments if his ownership holds where it is.
Okay. Paul Duong says Machado. Why is everybody calling double dong? So he says Machado double dong. Everybody's calling double. You can just predict 1 home run. It's a lot easier. You're a lot more likely to get it right. All right, Adam, who is your home run pick today?
So I'll start by saying I do like the Yordan Alvarez call.
Sure.
There's a lot of spots to pick from today.
Yeah.
I will go with we can't take cores, right?
Correct.
Okay. I'll steal the other one that was mentioned. I'll take Josh Young.
I'm gonna go. Wait, hang on. Do we have? Yes. I'm going to go with Pete Alonso.
I like it.
It's pretty good.
Yep.
All right, Adam. Any final thoughts?
Both articles. I think there's 2 basketball games today, so both articles will be out soon. BetPro soon. Basketball show later.
I'll also be on the basketball show later, which is why I know it's a 2-game slate because I don't do the single game slates apparently. Just I've lucked out every single time yet to do a showdown slate, just doing the 2-game slate. So I'll be back there, but I'll also be back in 8 minutes with Lindy. We're going to be doing an underdog NBA show. So if you're interested in playing some underdog NBA today, we're going to be talking about that in 8 minutes. So catch me there. Again, thank you guys so much for joining us. Please do hit the like button if you haven't already, and we will see you very, very soon, potentially or otherwise, hopefully later tonight. Talk to you guys later.